It was a foggy morning on July 28, 2025, when Pedro Almeida, a 29-year-old documentarian, parked his battered Jeep at the entrance of an almost invisible dirt road, a few kilometers from Campo Verde, a forgotten little town in the heart of Brown. Beside him, his assistant, Carla Mendes, adjusted the camera while flipping through scribbled notes. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, pointing to the map. "This area doesn't appear on any official records." Pedro smiled, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "That's exactly why we're going. An untouched forest full of legends. It might be the perfect material for our next video." The local legend spoke of an abandoned village known as where the Forgotten Well, a place where people vanished without a trace and whispers echoed among the trees. Campo Verde's residents avoided the topic, but an old hunter, Donato, had mentioned a secret path leading to the ruins. Pedro packed his backpack with equipment, camera, recorder, flashlights, and supplies for 2 days, while Carla hesitated, a chill running down her spine. "If something goes wrong, don't blame me," she muttered, following him. The forest swallowed them quickly. Sunlight barely pierced the dense canopy of pine and cedar trees, and the sound of birds gave way to an oppressive silence, broken only by the crunch of twigs beneath their feet. After hours of walking, they spotted the first signs, a rotten wooden sign that read "Warning. Turn back," and further ahead, the outlines of crumbled houses covered in moss and vines. "We're here," Pedro said, raising the camera. But Carla grabbed his arm. "Listen," she whispered, a low sound, like a distant wail, seemed to come from the heart of the village. The village was a ghost of the past, stone and wooden houses, some still with doors hanging from the windows, formed in a regular circle around a central square where a dry fountain had been overtaken by roots. Pedro filmed everything, narrating with enthusiasm. "Here we're in where the Forgotten Well, a place lost to time. No records, no survivors. Let's find out what happened." Carla, however, felt a heavy gaze, as if something watched them from the shadows. They entered the first house, a cottage with cracked walls and a rusted iron stove on the floor. They found a torn notebook filled with scribbles, drawings of faceless humanoid figures and repeated phrases. "They took us. Don't look back." Pedro kept the notebook, intrigued. "This is gold for the documentary," he said. Carla frowned, or a warning. "Let's leave before nightfall." But Pedro's curiosity pulled him deeper. In the center of the square, they discovered a descending stone staircase, nearly hidden beneath leaves, a basement or something. He suggested going down with the flashlight. Carla followed, reluctant, and the air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, a circular chamber opened up, its walls covered in strange symbols and a stone altar at the center, stained with something that looked like dried blood. "This isn't natural," Carla murmured, filming. Suddenly, Pedro's flashlight flickered, and a whisper echoed, "Stay, stay." Night fell quickly, and the forest seemed to close in around the village. Pedro and Carla set up camp in the square, using a tent and a fire to keep warm. But the fire didn't drive away the cold rising from the staircase. The whispers returned, now clearer, with overlapping voices that seemed to call their names. "Pedro, Carla, stay." Carla grabbed the camera, trying to capture the sound. But the recording only showed static. "It's just the wind," Pedro said, trying to convince himself. But then something fell from the tree above, a torn piece of fabric, stained with something dark. Carla picked it up with trembling hands. "This is blood," she whispered. Before they could react, the sound of dragging footsteps came from the darkness, and a shadow passed quickly between the houses. Pedro raised the flashlight, but saw nothing. Let's check it out." He insisted, ignoring Carla's protests. They explored a larger house, which appeared to have been an improvised church. Broken pews and a moss-covered pulpit hinted at its former use on the altar. They found a dusty journal written by a priest named Joachim. Dated 1875, the entries described a plague that struck the village, followed by visions of entities from the depths demanding sacrifices. "They chose us," read a final entry before the writing dissolved into incoherent scrolls. Carla closed the journal. "This isn't a legend. It's real." The next morning, exhausted but determined, they decided to explore the chamber again. Pedro filmed every detail while Carla traced the symbols on the walls, noticing patterns that resembled constellations. "It looks like a map," she said, pointing to a central star on the altar. They found a circular hole, as if something fit into it. Pedro took the notebook they found in the house and saw an identical drawing of the hole, along with a carved stone described as the key of the forgotten. The search for the stone led them to a collapsed house at the edge of the village. Under the rubble, Carla found an obsidian artifact, cold to the touch, etched with runes. "This is it," she said, handing it to Pedro. But as they placed the stone on the altar, the chamber shook. The walls began to pulse, and the voices intensified. "Now sharp, free us." A dark mist rose from the ground, and indistinct figures emerged, humanoid shadows with empty eyes. "Run!" Carla screamed, pulling Pedro toward the stairs, but the exit had closed, sealing them inside. The mist surrounded them, and one of the figures touched Pedro's shoulder, leaving a burnt mark on his skin. "You brought us back," the entity whispered, its voice echoing in their minds, trapped. Pedro and Carla desperately tried to reverse the ritual. Carla remembered Joachim's notes, which mentioned a counter-ritual to close the portal, using chalk from her backpack. She drew a circle round the altar while Pedro recited phrases from the journal that resembled banishment chants. The obsidian stone began to vibrate, and the entities drew closer, their forms solidifying into skeletal bodies with claws. "Keep going," shouted Pedro, as one of the creatures slashed him, leaving deep gashes on his arm. Carla completed the circle and smashed the stone on the ground with a larger rock. A thunderous sound echoed, and the chamber was flooded with white light. The entities let out high-pitched screams before dissolving, and the mist vanished. The exit opened again, but the price was high. Pedro was pale, the mark on his shoulder pulsing, injured and traumatized. They managed to escape the chamber and return to the tent. The forest felt different, more alive, as if the entity's presence had been expelled. But Pedro was not well. The mark on his shoulder wouldn't heal, and he began hearing whispers even after leaving the village. Carla took him back to Campo Verde, where a local doctor treated the wounds but warned, "This is not normal. It seems infected by something supernatural." Days later, at home, Pedro was editing the footage, but the recordings only showed static and distorted voices saying, "You didn't escape." Carla noticed the mark on Pedro was spreading, and he began having visions, figures in the shadows, calling him back. One night, he disappeared, leaving only a note. "They are calling me. I'm sorry." Carla returned to the forest alone, determined to save him. She found Pedro's jeep abandoned near the village, and upon descending into the chamber, saw the altar rebuilt, the obsidian stone intact. In the center, Pedro knelt, his eyes hollow, whispering with the entities. "He is ours now," said the voices. Carla attempted the counter-ritual again, but the stone exploded, sealing the portal permanently, and with it, Pedro. Carla returned to Campo Verde, carrying the weight of guilt. The village of where the forgotten well was marked as a forbidden zone, and the locals avoided speaking of the incident. But at night, deep in the forest, whispers still echo, and some swear they see a lone figure among the trees. Perhaps Pedro, perhaps something that took his place. Carla's documentary, titled Where the Forgotten Well, went viral, but she never returned to the forest, afraid the forgotten might call her again.